We cannot afford to talk around issues anymore. We have to address these issues head on. I called for a ban after San Bernardino and was met with great scorn and anger. But now, many years, and I have to say, many years, but many are saying that I was right to do so. And although the pause is temporary, we must find out what is going on. We have to do it. It will be lifted, this ban, when and as a nation we're in a position to properly and perfectly screen these people coming into our country. They're pouring in, and we don't know what we're doing.
I mean, those are really strong terms. What was the effect of that with Donald Trump, Gary, on the electorate as a whole? This is a primary race. He was going for base voters, but this really sort of ended it for a lot of people.
Well, I think for those kind of people, he already ended it before. I mean, you know, Donald Trump, and I've heard him interviewed about this, it's, hey, you know, I say these things, I gauge the reaction, my standing in the polls keeps going up. So, you know, through the primaries, it seemed to be serving him, but he's got to become a much more thoughtful candidate going forward. But, you know, what he said about the judge was just off the scales.
This is a judge who's involved in a Trump University, which is this now defunct educational institution, which there's a fraud case against. Jesse, the Muslim comments, the comments on the judge, as you quite rightly pointed out, Gary, and some comments that could be seen as misogynist have kind of led to negatives of 70% against him with women. This is not a typical candidate who runs in a general election with these negatives.
Absolutely not. And we saw for several weeks after the Republican primary ended in May, a lot of Republican leaders, a lot of GOP strategists coming out and essentially publicly saying, you know, Trump, why are you doing this? Why are you continuing to stand by this Muslim ban? Why are you continuing to have disparaging remarks on certain minority groups? And that is something that it seems like the candidate is only now, if he is, starting to acknowledge and realize in his softening of the Muslim ban and, you know, firing last week his campaign manager, showing that he wants to some extent go in a different direction.
But this is not happening, is it? Sorry, I just want to butt in here, Joe. You can go in a second, but we've got a tweet from Donald Trump. He's very good at tweeting on social media. Appreciate the congrats for being right on radical Islam. I don't want congrats, I want toughness and vigilance. We must be smart. This was hours after the worst mass shooting in the United States in Orlando. Joe, just pick this up. Social media is sort of driving this as well, and Donald Trump's a master at it.
Oh, social media is driving everything now, to be quite candid. It even drives networks and cable TV for the most part. It's now an integral part of our news media. But I just have to tell you, Donald Trump has insulted everything, everybody. I'm just sitting here trying to think of all the demographics. I mean, here we are, a country getting ready to celebrate the 4th of July. A unique
Independence Day.
Independence Day.
Sorry.
And I apologize for what happened to your country, but the reality is we won.
Different show.
But we pride ourselves on being this melting pot, of being this salad. But he has insulted, even to the point now, he's insulted Native Americans. And, you know, to sit there and call a sitting senator Pocahontas, and he thinks that that's funny.
Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, I mean, let me just be straight up with you. He's a thug. He can't help it. He's a New York real estate mobile thug.
Joe, you're playing into negative territory here as a talk show host.
But he's a thug.
No,
but
I understand that.
I mean, but you tell me, any of us sitting here, what has he said that is redeeming about women, about Hispanics, about I mean, Asians? He sits up there and refers to them as Orientals. I mean, that's furniture. That's not human beings.
Your point is well said, Joe.
Yeah.
Jesse, what politically does he have to gain with this strategy? Because there are some people, and this is a thought not just in America, that say, we're glad he's not politically correct. We can't say these things in our own neighborhoods, and he's saying it. Does he have a point here? And do people follow him as a result?
Well, of course, yes. People are going to be following him in all the parts of the world. If, you know, as the major, one of the major presumptive nominees of a major political party in the U.S.
But in terms of votes?
In terms of votes, it's hard to, for the Muslim ban, for instance, he took a lot of credit for that himself by saying, oh, I had to propose this Muslim ban so we could talk about Islam, we could talk about radical Islam, taking credit for that after President Obama then, spoke out and Hillary Clinton then used the phrase radical Islamism. So that's something that he's going to, he's going to speak his mind and he's going to worry about the political consequences.
Are there
later.
enough votes in going this negative,
Listen,
alienating group?
Absolutely. 4 months.
Oh, I'm so upset you said that.
4 months is an eternity in presidential politics.
Overnight can be a
What
lifetime.
Trump can't do, he cannot become another homogenized focus group candidate. Then he loses.
You mean like Mitt Romney or
he cannot.
John
Then he
McCain?
loses the spontaneity that attracted the people to him to begin with. But he needs to be more thoughtful. He needs to
How do you
think
do that?
through
Because he
before
tries
says
and then he
something.
fails.
But he
can't.
already seems to be getting better at it. I mean,
can't.
since the judge remarked, he's been using teleprompters. And I can't think of
He's also
anything-
slipped 10 points in the poll.
Oh, but there's a combination of things. If he starts being thoughtful, you're going to see these polls
he can't.
bouncing. Let me finish, Jim. You're going to see these polls bouncing around between now and the presidential
So you,
debates.
I'm not trying to make you out to be the bad guy, but you see a lot of benefit in this sort of negativism,
I don't see
negativity.
any benefit to the civil discourse
No, but
in the
winning.
United States. But listen, the guy beat 17 A-team Republicans for the most part. So there's got to be something out there that people like
they
about
were
him.
17 of the weakest, dumbest people the Republican Party could have.
I presume you're not a Republican.
No, I'm not. That they could have. I mean, Ben Carson had no business out there.
Right.
I mean, when you look at it, and I think, and I'm not disagreeing with you. He's right on with his base. There's no ifs, ands. But here's the point. You can say things in primary votes to win a state. And you can speak to that state. You can speak to Mississippi when you're trying to win Mississippi, but that doesn't register in New Jersey. Now you have a national
Or in purple
race.
states like Virginia and
That's
Nevada.
right. And so now you have to appeal to the nation. So I don't think the color of the map's going to change on election night. The South's going to be solidly red, but there will be these important swing states.
Jesse, going back to what Gary said earlier about turnout, do you think he's the ultimate turnout machine? Because Mitt Romney did not get the turnout he expected 8 years ago in places like Ohio and lost them by,
Right.
8 rather than 1 or 2, it looked like. Could Trump turn out? I mean, we've seen this in Brexit vote referendums, for example.
Absolutely, yeah.
This negativity working.
Right, there are a lot of demographics where Republicans traditionally, this election cycle, are looking at maybe they have access to. Blue collar, even Democrats in some states like Ohio or in the Midwest there, that are traditionally turned off to Republicans, where Trump has kind of tapped into some type of populist view and, blasting these trade legislation, blasting NAFTA today, saying that he would potentially repeal that.
Trade deals are unpopular, yes.
That's something that most Republicans, that goes against party doctrine, and that's something that they haven't, touched in recent years.
But Joe, and I know you're itching to get in on this, but
No.
because you made some very solid points. But Trump turning out his vote also turns off so many other groups. As you were saying.
Look, this is a street fight. I think we can all agree. This is going to be a ground game, and what you said is absolutely right. He will turn out that disenchanted voter, that person who's mad at not only at the establishment. These are going to be anti-establishment voters. And so what we've been saying is this is a matter of you've got to register and you've got to get your folk out to the polls. It's a ground game.
Can I just flip the tables a little bit? Because we talked about Donald Trump for a while. Hillary Clinton. Before we talk about, I want to play a little bit about her responding to the lack of trust that the American people have. She seems very wounded by this. Let's just have a listen.
You hear 25 years worth of wild accusations, anyone would start to wonder. And it certainly is true. I've made mistakes. I don't know anyone who hasn't. So I understand people having questions. Now, maybe we can persuade people to change their minds by marshaling facts and making arguments to rebut negative attacks. But that doesn't work for everyone. You can't just talk someone into trusting you. You've got to earn it.
Gary, that was a very Clinton response to the 25 years of accusations. But she does have a perception problem out there. Why, considering all her years of public service, First Lady, Senator of New York, as Secretary of State, twice presidential candidate.
Yeah, but you have a litany of problems that we already talked about, dating back to the Clinton
And we had
administration.
a report on Benghazi today as well.
The Benghazi, I'm less concerned about that, but you know.
This is when the ambassador was killed during her tenure.
But there's
in Libya.
just the other things, you know. Why won't she release the speeches she's given, for example,
Wall Street banks like
or
Goldman
anyone
Sachs.
else for that matter? Yeah. So, so much of this is a problem of her own making, and what I've learned in politics is statements of value are not believable. You can't say I'm honest and have that be credible. Statements of fact are credible. You know, hey, I've been in this job for 4 years and there hasn't been a scandal. But the problem is she has scandals. The email, I think, being the
This is
most
her
recent.
own email
and the
server
most-
in her home when she was meant to have it going through the State Department.
through the State
She initially
Department.
said, Joe, that she didn't want to carry 2 phones, and that seems to have
Well,
changed.
look,
What is it with Hillary?
well,
I mean,
no, you're absolutely right. I think you admit you blew it. This corporate America does it all the time. You see the CEOs get on when they blow up. So I'm on the board of governors of the Red Cross. We just had a scandal about a poster. And thank God the president of the Red Cross hit it, put out a statement, we're going to correct it.
it's getting ahead of the problem, isn't it?
You get ahead of the problem. However, if I were Hillary Clinton and advising her, and I'm not, I'm telling you, if Donald Trump comes at me about releasing the speeches, I will get on him about releasing your taxes. I'll release those speeches the day you release those taxes, and let's see how much money you did contribute to all these charities that you said you did. That's how you handle Donald Trump.
Jesse Benz, you write for the publication The Hill, which monitors Capitol Hill Congress, and baiting Clinton as a sport up there. Why has it been going on for so long? And have they wounded her that much that she's now just totally not credible, even though she hasn't been convicted of anything or charged of anything so far?
Well, yeah, it's a battle of perceptions, of course. You know,
Yes.
all this political stuff, and there are those looming factors. The FBI investigation to her email, we don't, that hasn't concluded yet that we know of, and so there's certainly those external things that are out of the control of Donald Trump, for instance, but in terms of messaging, he is going to, it's very easy for him to just focus on the perception of doing something wrong, even if it's not proven. The Benghazi report today is a good example of that. An 800-page report, and Trump, oftentimes refers to Benghazi saying, she's guilty, she left the ambassador there to die, or that kind of language.
Which the report says nothing like it, of
And
course.
yeah, and the report, of course, providing more details, more narrative surrounding what actually happened, the administration's response. But as far as a smoking gun that Trump can use, he's not worried about that. He's going to use his own
Sorry, you want
remarks.
to say something, Gary?
No,
Well, I want to just wheel it back because we've only got a few minutes left. This is horrible for civic discourse, isn't it? And, we've seen this time and time again in history. When civic discourse turns negative, things can happen. You can't get the genie back in the bottle sometimes, Gary. What do you think? I mean, this election is potentially has some really nasty effects going forward.
I was talking with some folks from Brazil last week, and as you know, their president's getting impeached. They have this
a very
massive
good
scandal.
comparison.
And the guy flat out said, the good news is it's finally gotten so bad that we're really going to have to do something about it in terms of rebuilding confidence in government, rebuilding civic trust. I would imagine among the Republicans, they are going to have to do some soul searching in terms of how did a Donald Trump manage to become their nominee,
We've
for
got more
example.
votes. I mean, by going negative.
Yeah, but
Joe-
I got to tell you, I'm sitting here fuming. 8 years ago, almost 8 years ago, you want to talk about negative? When we referred to this president as a primate. 8 years ago, when we sat up here and questioned whether this man was even a U.S. citizen in the birther movement.
So you don't think it's got any worse?
No, at least as I watched what President Obama, candidate Obama went through. I mean, it was. I mean, we act as if this is something we didn't see, and what people want to ignore what they did to the family and the first wife.
You just remind me. Jefferson called John Adams a hermaphrodite. I seem to remember.
I mean, but you're going
But
way
they didn't
back.
have cable
I'm saying
news.
I can go back just 8 years, and let's not pretend that we look. The Republicans created this Frankenstein. And now it's the true Frankenstein novel. He's turned on the village.
And it was
Last word.
Donald Trump himself, going back to 2011 that forced the White House to eventually release President Obama's birth certificate. He was the vocal proponent of the birther movement, so-called. And so this is something where Trump has stepped into a void that has been there, whether whoever's responsible for it or not. He's tapped into that void and he stepped in. The big question is, can he bring it to fruition? Can he actually cross the finish line and overcome that final hurdle in November, despite all of these negatives?
But Gary, at what cost to civic discourse? Is winning all it's about?
Oh, heavens no. I think, the means never justify the ends. If you go through human history, I've never found an example where the means justified the ends.